The following presentation is a production of Ride the Wave Media.
We are those guys. We hope to be your guys, bringing you the latest from the National Football League. And Nick Ferguson joining me after a bombshell trade where the Buffalo Bills part ways with wide receiver Stefon Diggs, sending him to the Houston Texans, along with a 2024 sixth-round pick, a 25 fifth-round pick, in exchange for a second-round pick in the 2025 draft. Nick, I remember it was so long ago when he left Minnesota to Buffalo in exchange for a first-round pick. Fast forward a few years, they have one AFC Championship appearance, and now he's on his way out. Where do you want to start? With the Texans side of things, or maybe with the Buffalo Bills and where their future outlook lies?
I think the best place to start is Bills, who I feel are the losers in all of this. When they acquired Stefon Diggs, like you said, from Minnesota, there was the hope that Stefon was going to help take Josh Allen's career to the next level and hopefully allow them to not only play in the playoff game, host the playoff game, but actually play in the Super Bowl. Some of those things were true and some were not true. So let's talk about the things that were true. You look at Stefon Diggs and what he was able to do to elevate Josh Allen's game, because the idea was like, spend a certain amount of money on a quarterback, you have to build talent around him. So it was a great move by Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott to go out and acquire, a guy of Stefon Diggs' talent. The only thing about it is that it never really blossomed to the way that most people thought, because there was this one team that was always in their way every single time. It was almost like the reverse, like the Patriots. Your Patriots were always in the way of Peyton Manning and Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs. That one team that they could not get over was the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. And look, man, we saw what happened on the sideline, and Stefon was pretty upset, as though he should, because there were moments where he was not featured the way that he should as a number one receiver, and they ended up losing. And I'll say, because people are blaming Stefon Diggs for, some of the imagery that we saw from him being so animated, but I'll also say that a lot of that responsibility falls on the shoulder of Josh Allen, who every time felt as though he's got to run the freaking ball.
Yeah.
It's like he's got to be that fantasy guy. No, throw the ball. That's why I never, for fantasy purposes, just for fantasy purposes,
yes,
that's why I never picked up Josh Allen as my quarterback, or better said, any Buffalo Bills running backs as my running backs, because they were not going to get any touches.
Well, we can extrapolate that, and I want to break down the two things that you said. Sort of the personal Stefon Diggs issues, right? The optics of complaining that you're not getting the football enough when you're leading the league in targets and catches, compared to that transition that the offense made and focusing more on James Cook. It's kind of deja vu for Stefon Diggs, because with the Vikings, they gravitated away from the passing game in order to go to Dalvin Cook. Mm-hmm. And now he's dealing with the same thing in Buffalo with his younger brother, James Cook, that the emphasis on running the football, he should, listen, too many cooks in the kitchen for Stefon Diggs. So there's a reason why he's onto his third NFL team. And the Bills were winning, man. Like, they ran into the Chiefs 3 times and lost 3 times in the postseason. But at the end of last year, they beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the regular season and kicked off a 6-game winning streak. You know how many touchdowns Stefon Diggs had during that stretch?
Probably 0.
He had some, he had some double-digit target games, but he had no games that he exceeded. He had one game. He had the Dolphins game where he was 7 catches, 87 yards. Other than that, you can't find him with over 55 receiving yards in that win streak. It's not about funneling targets or forcing a ball a certain way. It was finding out how they could run the ball, play adequate enough defense, and they were averaging 25 points a game, but their opponents were scoring less than 2 touchdowns for the most part. So it's a changing of the guard, kind of understanding that with a new play caller after letting go of Ken Dorsey and better defense being played, that they ultimately made this decision. And it's not an easy one, because they're now eating $31 million towards next season. That's why a lot of people thought this would never happen, and why I came in saying it was so shocking, because $31 million for your receiver to play somewhere else, this is shades of Russell Wilson to it. And, maybe the Bills are thinking it's an addition by subtraction. But the bottom line is, Nick, it puts pressure on Sean McDermott. It puts even more pressure on Brandon Beane, because on the surface, they essentially moved down 30 picks or so. And depending on how the Texans finish, but they acquired Stefon Diggs for the 22nd overall pick, which the Vikings used on Justin Jefferson. And now fast forward 3 or 4 years later, if they get a mid to late second round pick, then they're moving down 25 spots essentially for 4 quality years of Stefon Diggs, which, on the ledger looks fine. But trying to balance that with the dead cap and kind of where this offense goes, knowing that Stefon Diggs and Gabe Davis are out the door, where does this offense kind of go?
Well, as the saying was when I was growing up, it's cheaper to keep her. But in this case, not with Stefon Diggs or with Russell Wilson. And that's the crazy part about it. You got 2 guys who are making a ginormous amount of the money, and the team has to take a dead cap hit, and they will be playing for other teams. So that means their previous team, someone in a desperation mode. Here with the Denver Broncos, have no idea what they're going to do at the quarterback position. And no matter who you bring in, will it make you better than a team within your division? So as the Bills part ways with Stefon Diggs, sending him to the Texans, does it truly make the team that much better? Are you really helping Josh Allen kind of take his game to a whole different level? And the answer to that question is no. Like, they signed Curtis Samuel, and I'm sure Curtis Samuel, when he signed in the offseason, he's thinking, okay, it's going to be me, KJ Hamler, a couple of other guys, and Stefon Diggs. Now, Curtis Samuel, within a day's notice, he's become receiver number 1. But if you're Josh Allen, you have to ask yourself, well, are they really helping me? Here's my question. Did they talk to Josh before they made this move?
Brandon Beane says that they didn't, that he woke up to the news, Brandon Beane, but a $260 million quarterback, I think he's going to be let in a little bit. Like, that this could be happening, is what Brandon Beane said. Be aware that it could happen, but I think Josh Allen would know that the trade was going down when it was going down.
Well, basically, he said, look, hey, be aware, we're going to screw you in the remaining of your career. Like, so we know before that we were competing with Kansas City, even though we didn't beat them, we were competing with them. Now we're going to tie not just both of your hands, but we're going to tie both of your feet together like this is a sack race. And we're going to hope that you can actually pull it off, because there's no way that you can currently look at the Bills roster and say that, hey, listen, they're even going to get out of their own division. Aaron Rodgers is going to be back. And if you looked at anything that Robert Saleh and what they're doing with their defense, they just made life that much harder for Josh Allen. So right now, for me, if you were to look at the AFC East and say, well, how is that going to finish? I'm going to put the Jets at number 1, Miami number 2, and I'm going to put both New England and the Bills at the bottom, and probably put, your Patriots number 4.
Well, that makes sense. I think Josh Allen is the type of player, is the boat that raises the tide that raises the boat, right? Josh Allen is that type of dynamic player. And, I shine the light on Brandon Beane because he took a big swing on a guy like Stefon Diggs. He took a big swing on a guy like Von Miller, and they were, they didn't achieve the success that they were hoping for. And for a lot of people, like, just being worse, being second best to Kansas City is good enough. But with a $260 million quarterback, it's no longer good enough. And it's no longer good enough to expect the Houston Texans to beat the Cleveland Browns and then go to sleep. We have a new contender in the AFC with the Houston Texans bringing on Stefon Diggs. Do we not? With CJ Stroud throwing to Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz. And the Texans had, a pretty exciting offseason. The NFL tweeted that they were the first team in NFL history to acquire players that in the past season had 100-yard catches in Diggs, 1,000 rushing yards in Joe Mixon, and 10 sacks in Danielle Hunter. So this Texans team got a whole lot exciting and may have even overtaken their division rivals, who we'll talk about a moment, in the Tennessee Titans.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Houston, they're going to be a problem.
Houston Texans. It is. Houston, Texas, led by CJ Stroud. And also, and there's another person that you failed to bring up who had a great showing last season, was Noah Brown. Right?
Yeah.
So, and Robert Woods. So you throw all of those guys in the second year with CJ Stroud, who was amazing in his first season as a rookie quarterback. And you're going to have Bobby Sloan, who's going into his second year.
Yep.
And so, I mean, you think about
who turned down head coaching opportunities.
Yeah, being able to spread the field out and then having a dynamic running back that can get you to tough yards of Joe Mixon, but also he has great hands out of the backfield. That is going to create matchup nightmares for opposing defensive coordinators. So the first thing that I saw when they added Stefon Diggs, I saw kind of glimpses of what it was like being in San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan or Mike McDaniel. All the pieces were not there at the time when I coached.
Right.
After I left, oddly enough, they added pieces, then they won the Super Bowl, right? Which is crazy. But when you look at what the Texans have done under DeMeco Ryans, they're trying to build it. And I know there's a question that was being talked about, or I guess the topic that's tossed out on social media. Well, thinking about what Stefon Diggs was as far as emotional and what we saw, will that locker room and DeMeco Ryans be able to tame him? And I was like, yes, because here's what we know as players. As you start to age, your window is closing. And I've seen photos of Stefon Diggs standing out there watching Kansas City celebrate. He's now celebrating. He's thinking that he's the missing piece to the fact that, I mean, Texas were one game away from playing in an AFC Championship game. He's thinking that he can be that particular guy. And if they stay healthy, I'm telling you, man, if they stay healthy, man, they will be one of the most dangerous teams in the AFC.
I'm looking at their schedule, and I've got 2 games circled that have to be primetime now. The Texans host the Buffalo Bills. That's the Stefon Diggs revenge game. Got to put that on Monday night.
Yep.
And then meanwhile, they go on the road to Arlington and Jerry World. So you have Stefon Diggs up against Trayvon Diggs. Those are the 2 games circled on my calendar for sure. And what I have circled, it's been a little while since we talked about, I mean, the Stefon Diggs move is probably the biggest trade. Yeah, of course, outside of Mac Jones going to Jacksonville, probably the biggest trade we've seen in the NFL this offseason, outside of L'Jarius Sneed going to Tennessee. And I don't think we've spent a lot of time on it. And it makes a lot of sense to transition from one AFC South team to another, where we've seen the additions that the Titans have made. And we're saying to ourselves, okay, Calvin Ridley. Okay, L'Jarius Sneed. Okay, Lloyd Cushenberry. Like, we're making additions to build around our young quarterback. Like, that's what we ask of teams to do, right? You identify someone, and while Will Levis is on his rookie year deal, can we be a competitive outfit with L'Jarius Sneed coming over for a 3rd round selection? It was kind of a low trade offer that other teams I thought would have come to the table for. But the impact of L'Jarius Sneed for those Tennessee Titans, plus the other moves that they've made, is this a competitive team against what we're considering to be a power in the Houston Texans, knowing they're going to play each other twice this year?
Yeah, it is, Alex. And I'll tell you why. Like, in years past, we looked at the AFC West, and AFC West was one of those tough divisions. Now we're going to have to look at the AFC South as being the tougher division, because you're going to have CJ Stroud, Trevor Lawrence, Will Levis, and Anthony Richardson when he comes back in that particular division. And you look at how Rand Carthon, their GM, who comes over from the San Francisco 49ers, spending so much time in their scouting department, and now he's trying to put his fingerprints on that Tennessee Titans team. And I can tell you this from my days playing with the Texans, that playing against the Titans, those games were always physical. Those games were always tough. All you have to do is go on YouTube and find the tapes of Andre Johnson and Cortland Finnegan. And that will tell you everything you need to know. And I know Rand is trying to develop a tough, hard-nosed team that is physical, and it starts with their quarterback. Watching Will Levis last year, and especially more importantly, the game against the Miami Dolphins, man, he was fired up with so much energy. The kid is physical. Yeah, he's still on a rookie deal, and you're right. It's going to allow the team to build these pieces around him. But when you just look at what the Titans are actually building, they're building a team that is physical on both sides of the ball, and adding Ladarius Sneed to that, that could equal more possessions for a young quarterback like Will Levis to help him develop more. So for me, I'm excited about the upcoming season. I'm excited about the moves the Texans have made. I'm excited to see that level of competition in that particular division. I mean, we can talk about the AFC East. We can talk about the AFC North. We can't talk about the AFC West. We can't. That's off limits. We cannot talk about that, Eric. So, I mean, Alex, if you were to bring that up, I am going to act as though that I did not hear, because that's the one division I don't want to talk about.
But in essence, the Chiefs don't get better by moving on from Sneed. So at least you got that going for you.
Well, see, that's what you think, right? Because last year was the year we thought that their offense was struggling because receivers dropping so many balls. But guess what? They found other ways to win with their defense.
Correct. They found ways to win. However, they still haven't, how many tries have they made to replace Tyreek Hill? And I understand they're not looking for a one-to-one replacement, but MVS hasn't worked out. Sky Moore hasn't worked out. Kadarius Toney hasn't worked out. Justin Watson hasn't worked out. We'll see with Rashee Rice. I mean, depending on what the NFL decides to do, but he could end up missing games for this year.
Is he going to be in uniform?
Again, it's hard to contend without being able to accurately address a certain position. And credit to Rand Carthon. What do teams that don't have a ton of success do to bring in talent? They pay a couple of million, over market value, which is how they landed Calvin Ridley, which is how they get, Chidobe Awuzie, who's I'm much more comfortable with as a cornerback too, with L'Jarius Sneed over there. So, I'm just saying the Chiefs aren't better for making this trade. I know full well that they liked what they saw in Trent McDuffie and the rest of that secondary in Kansas City. Now, I guess I want to wrap things with a trade that hasn't happened, but I'm wondering why it hasn't happened yet. A big wide receiver on the move, Stefon Diggs. T. Higgins in Cincinnati. The Bengals are better with him there with Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, but as far as the latest reporting suggests, no discussion on a contract extension. He signed the franchise tender, so he's at least there for now. But if they were to try to allocate $25 million a year for him and $35 million a year for Jamar Chase, they're paying $110 million for three players on the offense that just doesn't seem sustainable. So I'm wondering if T. Higgins, why he isn't already on the move, when will he be on the move, and are there any teams that could use his skill set?
There are multiple teams that could use his skill set. When you look at your Patriots, they can use his skill set. He would be great. I would love to see him as a football fan with the Green Bay Packers or the Minnesota Vikings. He would be beloved here in Denver, but Denver still doesn't have a quarterback that can really get him the ball. So that's something that's in question. But here's what I think is going to happen with the Bengals, right? Notice though, Higgins has already signed his tender. Right now, he's not going anywhere unless someone trades for him or the team decides to trade him away.
We haven't seen that type of offer that would blow them away, but I figured something in the range, after seeing what Brian Burns went for with, I believe it was a 39th overall pick, and L'Jarius Sneed is a third rounder and Stefon Diggs is a future too, the Bengals are just maybe holding out hope that they can get, a fair offer. It just doesn't seem like there's anything out there that's going to bowl them over. Yes, we have to make this trade now. But an early two would make sense to me.
Right. Okay. They don't have to. They can just retain the rights of the player, watch how draft starts to unfold, and then see what happens there, because there's a chance that Higgins could be moved at some point in the draft, or after we see, rookie mini camps, teams could start to make moves saying, okay, well, the guys that we brought in, we don't think that we have the arsenal that we will like. Hey, let's revisit that conversation we had before free agency started or during the draft, and let's see if we can come to a mutual understanding. And maybe there's an opportunity for a T. Higgins, but either way, Higgins is going to be paid. The only difference is that he doesn't have a long-term deal, which is bothersome to a lot of players. But I say he's a very talented wide receiver, and any team would be lucky to have him. I mean, San Francisco, they need more wide receivers. They would love to have him. But another place I think he would be great, two other places, the Detroit Lions or with the Rams.
Yeah, the rich getting richer. That sounds pretty good to me.
Hey, listen, you lived that life for 20 years as a Patriots fan. Don't complain now.
We talked about it. You can always go back on the Those Guys podcast YouTube feed to pull up our Dynasty recap. 5 episodes, all 10 episodes of the Dynasty documentary, pointing out where Nick Ferguson was at those moments in time when the Patriots were winning and when Tom Brady was the number 1 quarterback in the NFL. And you can do that on your own time. They're in this same podcast feed where you found us, Those Guys, talking about what's going on in the NFL today. Nick, before we split, we're coming off of a holiday weekend, and I know I'm conflicted here. So I believe you partook in an Easter celebration, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Nick, before we split, how are you handling the amount of candy that may be in your house? Because I know you can't pour apple cider vinegar into those Easter eggs that you find during the hunt. How are you coping with food that's not normally in the house? Because me personally, I just went through a bag of peanut M&Ms that if it weren't there, I wouldn't even think about it. But they got those cute little pastel colors.
Mm-hmm.
How are you putting up with maybe some unsavory food in the house right now?
Well, the whole idea, Alex, is to make sure that you have an account on how much of that unsavory food that you bring in. But I will say that with my kids and the candy that they receive from the Easter Bunny, it does require one to exercise a certain restraint and discipline when you see them just kind of moseying around eating and offering you certain things. You have to say no. You have to use willpower as much as you can and say no. If that doesn't work, you go take it and you put it in your trunk.
He's Nick Ferguson. Where's the best place to find candy? The trunk of his car. Where's the best place to find the latest in the NFL? It's right here with Those Guys. We hope to be your guys. We'll catch you guys leading up to the NFL draft. Plenty of tape that Nick is grinding through at Nick Ferguson _25 on all socials. If you have any questions about what your team wants to do in the draft, particularly if you're a Broncos fan, that's where Nick is doing his bread and butter. So until next time, Nick, what do you have for the people?
Hey, man, sweets, don't eat too much of them because do you know that it was a dentist that invented cotton candy? How dare he? How dare he do that?
Big dentist, man. Big dentist.